What happens when you find out that your husband or wife has got a very active profile on Tinder? They're out there looking for another partner, but you're sitting there as their spouse. You've been married to this person, and there they are telling the whole world how they're looking for another partner, that what they get at home isn't enough. They want something more. But they're being extremely public about it. Well, if you can imagine how awkward that situation would be in your life, this is exactly what has happened in our politics over the last week or so. And it all relates back to the budget that is still waiting to be passed. Now, as we know, the ANC sprung a surprise on its GNU partners back in February, where a few minutes before the budget speech was meant to be presented by our Minister of Finance, the GNU partners found out that it included a 2 percentage point increase in VAT from 15% to 17%. And they immediately said, whoa, stop the bus. We will not approve this, because it wasn't discussed. And it's a big deal. It's a big move. As you've heard so many times, VAT affects all of us, but it disproportionately affects people at the bottom end of the economic pyramid. And any party that agrees to a VAT increase of that magnitude is kind of signing their political death warrant in a country like South Africa. So that was rejected, and the minister didn't deliver his speech. He came back. The ANC is used to getting their own way. So what they did was they said, well, we've got to keep it in there because, dear God, we can't relent and be shown to be partners. So they said, we'll make it a 1 percentage point increase spread over 2 years. 0.5% this year and 0.5% next year. When they were asked the logical question, which is, why not do one of two things or both? One is, let's cut expenditure. Another, let's stimulate economic growth. The ANC not really big fans of either of those suggestions. Why? Because they know that their cadres run 700 state-owned companies that can't make money, and they get funded by the state, so they don't want to cut back on that because otherwise largesse goes away. Economic growth has never been something that's sat comfortably with the ANC. So the ANC decided, well, we have 40%, plus probably about 3 or 4% from those entrepreneurial parties that'll do anything to get positions, people like Good, Al-Jamar, More and More Patriotic Alliance, but they still needed to make up the shortfall. So they went on to the political equivalent of Tinder. They went and spoke to Mkhonto Wesizwe, said, hey guys, these guys are being really mean to us. How about you step in? We'll kick them out. We'll divorce them. You can be our next partner. Mkhonto Wesizwe said, thanks but no thanks. Words to those effect. One would imagine that the deal breaker would be that Mkhonto Wesizwe has got some real political demands, the biggest one of which is always that they will only become a partner of the ANC if they get rid of President Cyril Ramaphosa. So they said, okay, and moved on to the next response to their Tinder ad, and that was the EFF, the Economic Freedom Fighters. Julius Malema, still sitting with just under 10%, and maybe if you can swing it with all those small parties that'll vote for anything, you can get this over the line. Julius Malema thought it was Christmas, and he quickly wheeled out his own demands. And the start of the weekend, it looked like a deal was going to be done. By the end of the weekend, everybody had cooled. And suddenly the ANC sort of went back, spoke to its Government of National Unity partners and said, let's work something out here. What has this process taught us about our politics and our parties in South Africa? It's taught us a couple of things. Let's break down the various players in this soap opera. What it's taught us about the ANC is that they still haven't come to terms with the fact that they have lost their majority. And as I've said before, all of those actions of passing acts that had been passed by the previous parliament, instead of holding out and just discussing with your GNU partners, really emboldened them to feel that they're still in power as they were. Besides, they've got the president, they've got the deputy president, they did everything, and it just emboldened them to the point where they felt that they were still in charge. And this was the first time they'd been called out on it. They didn't like it. They were looking for a pliant partners who would just do anything. Well, there's only so many Patricia de Lille's in the world. For the rest, they have demands of the government. Will the ANC be able to become partners that negotiate or collaborate with their GNU partners? The jury's out. I think that what they will do is they will listen to their GNU partners, and there'll be a bit of face saving for both sides of this government of national unity. They will push through their 0.5% increase in VAT this year and 0.5% next year, and in return there'll be a little bit of cutting here and there, nothing dramatic. Because let's understand, the 0.5% increase in VAT is only going to yield like 16 billion rand. There's going to be a 60 billion rand hole, which, as we know with government accounting, is probably going to be double that. So even the VAT increase didn't solve the problem. But I think that the responses to the ANC's Tinder profile and the other parties telling them pretty much a different version, but the similar response to what their GNU partners did, saying, we'll get into bed with you as long as some of our demands are met, I think did frighten the ANC, and perhaps they'll be a little bit more negotiable than what they were a month ago. Let's wait and see. What did it tell us about the DA? And what we're going to do is we're going to bracket Freedom Front Plus, because they pretty much follow a similar sort of thought pattern and behavioral pattern. Both of them were against any increase in VAT. But what does it tell us about those parties? Well, I think that the one thing that it did tell us is that the DA sold themselves terribly short in the power that they wield within the government of national unity. And they need to be heard a lot more than what they should do. And if they're not being heard, they need to be felt. So I got a feeling that what will come out of this is a more strident DA, a party that really goes out there, tells people exactly what they want, and will probably make them a little bit better in the GNU. This could be a good moment for the GNU. But let's understand how bad the options were. You know, there's the popular term called Brinkmanship, political term, used now in political terms. What it really means is that, you know, two parties are taking a fight to the edge of disaster. They're taking it to the brink of disaster, where everybody's playing chicken. Nobody wants to blink. I've got my line, you've got your line. We refuse to see each other. And we say, well, guys, let's go over the cliff. We're both going to go over the cliff, in the hope that the other person will eventually, at the last minute, say, no, not me. I'll do what you want me to do, or vice versa. Well, this act of brinkmanship by both sides has proven to be a very big determining factor, I think, going forward. Because by holding out to longer than what most people thought, the DA might get much of what it wanted. But it's going to be tested again. So it better get used to brinkmanship with the ANC. There's going to be many threats to come in the coming years of the government of national unity falling apart. The DA has no option. They're going to have to keep on playing this game until such time as the ANC says, we've had enough of you, or the fights become fewer and fewer, and in actual fact, the two parties find each other. But it also told us something about some of the other parties. Patriotic Alliance supported the VAT increase, and they said that it's not worth collapsing the GNU. But let's also remember that the Patriotic Alliance is quite happy for Johannesburg to be governed the way it's governed in coalition with the ANC and the EFF. Now, for those of you not in Johannesburg, understand that Johannesburg is so bad that even President Ramaphosa was shocked by the state of Johannesburg, and he's never shocked by anything. So, yeah, it shows you that they are really political prostitutes prepared to go with the flow as long as they get power. And let's think of what this has shown us about the parties outside of the GNU, Mkhonto Wesizwe. They seem to have been dismissed so quickly that either they still don't know what they stand for, or their infighting is still so big that they couldn't have a coherent conversation, because the whole discussion with MK seemed to be over in an eye blink. So I don't think they are ready to be a political force just yet. I think ideologically they're a little bit all over the show. Don't know what they are. Are they the Communist Party of Floyd Shivambu? Are they the Royalist Party of Jacob Zuma? Are they the Zulu Nationalist Party that used to look like the IFP? We don't know. But all we know is that they're not ready for power yet. The EFF is an interesting one. If you were Julius Malema, the idea of a deal would have been incredibly appealing. He has lost a lot of support recently. He lost his number 2, 3, and 4 in his party that left and left the party. And this could have been a way back in, i.e. a reverse takeover of the ANC. And I got a feeling that at the end of the day, that a deal doesn't get struck with the EFF, because I think that the idea of dealing with Julius Malema was terrifying to the ANC. He has a strong leader without a party, and he has a big party without a leader. It could have been the ultimate reverse takeover. And I think that terrified some of the comrades. You know, if you are one of those people low on talent, I don't know, Fikile Mbalula, Paul Mashatile, this must really be your worst idea. Having Julius Malema coming in, probably expecting to be deputy president or senior cabinet minister. We all know that he was not going to be silent, sitting in the back room, fixing up home affairs. No, he's going to be right out in the front, calling it his government. It was a big play by the EFF, but I don't think that this is the time for those kind of big plays. I think by not doing a deal for the ANC, this might not be good for the EFF, but that wasn't their choice to make. Where does this leave South Africa? We're not out of the woods yet. This is still potentially a terrifying situation. Because what happens if this budget doesn't get passed? Well, it could lead to the collapse of the current government of national unity. The budget doesn't get passed. It triggers a whole lot of things, which eventually leads to a budget not being passed and a motion of no confidence being tabled. And probably the victim or the aim, the target for that government, that motion of no confidence, is usually going to be the president. And if the ANC manage to lose their GNU partners, it's very unlikely that President Ramaphosa would survive that government, that vote of no confidence. And if that happens, a few more processes later, which would fall quite quickly, we could be seeing elections again in South Africa well before the end of the year. But in South Africa, before the worst happens, we always strike a dirty deal. And the dirty deal is going to be a watered-down budget. There's going to be a whole lot of people in the GNU saying, it was never really a problem. We were always going to find each other. And there'll be a 0.5 percentage point increase in VAT and a bit of a cut here and a bit of a cut there. But South Africa is on a knife edge. And I do think that this government of national unity, let's hope, has learnt a lesson that they need each other and they better work together. If the country doesn't have economic growth, there is no reason for a party like the Democratic Alliance, like Freedom Front Plus, to be in this government of national unity. Quite simply, if they're achieving nothing by being there, then what is the point? Rather go and be in the opposition benches. And I think that's the way that they will treat it. For the ANC, They are in their last moments of power. Whichever way this goes, I'm telling you that their vote's going to diminish at the next election, and this is their last hope of staying relevant. So get ready for more of these crazy antics. South Africa is in a very tense situation, but at least on this particular budget issue, I got a feeling that the normal old South African way of doing a deal which doesn't make either of the parties happy is going to happen. Much like the birth of the new South Africa, so everybody's slightly unhappy. It's going to be the way that this thing gets settled, and the sun will shine the next day. But these things will go into the memory bank, and it'll change the way that South Africa is governed if this government of national unity stays together. So, thank you so much for watching this. Thank you to Pace Car Rental that helped keep us on the air. Subscribe to the State of the Nation. We'll keep you up to date with some great information. Thank you all for joining us today.